we will be starting in a few minutes. Si Senator Tatad is just logging on. Hindi daw dumating yung apo niya eh. So we will be waiting for him. Former Secretary Harry Roque will also be joining us, and Professor Butch Valdez. I have my very intelligent and beautiful co-host, si Miss Ana Malindog. Unfortunately, si Sas was not feeling well this morning, so we asked her to take a rest. It looks like some of our friends are still getting positive, so please be careful and stay safe. Siguro malamig lang siguro ang panahon, no? Ana, you're on mute, so maybe we'll do a few chika moments. I love your background.
Oh, I see. Oh, Sas can't make it. Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you now, loud and clear. Very nice.
Okay. Oh, I was like thinking it's Sas that is the co-host. So she's not feeling well, no? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, I hope she gets
You'll
better.
Be stuck with me today. We'll have to entertain the audience today. Many developments, very exciting times indeed, no? Parang ang bilis ng we'll do a little bit of chika moments for our audience. What do you think? You're also a geopolitical expert yourself. Minsan di ka na namin mabook eh. Sobra ka ng VIP na yung mga invitations mo internationally. How are our friends abroad saying about the Philippine position? And you're on record,
Actually, ganun din naman ang ano nila. And actually, they're also looking at the Philippines, especially how the country will position itself, and given the tensions and geopolitical competition and rivalry between two huge and great powers, no? I mean, you have China in there, you have the United States, and even other countries like Russia and the rest, no? So it's like a very interesting time, according to some of my international friends, and they're really like, looking at the Philippines and what will be the policies that, the current administration is pursuing really. Because sometimes, itong ating tinatawag na independent foreign policy, sometimes nakakalito. Independent foreign policy ba? Or talaga, alam mo, may mga ano pa dito, may mga issues pa na, and some of my friends are saying like, parang we're pivoting down to the side of the United States. Sabi ko, mamaya, sandali. Probably not. Probably the current government is trying to balance its relation, but many people are already, especially international, your foreign people are already looking at the Philippines as if the Philippines is already pivoting to the United States. So I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Let's try to be more objective probably, and let's see what will happen in the next coming days or months, no? And I told them as well that, you see, the president of my country is going to have a state visit in Beijing soon. That will be probably a month from
2023, no? The first
January,
one in 2023.
January, first week of January, yeah, yes. I think.
And actually, even, is it the APEC that PBBM met with Xi Jinping in the sidelines, no?
Yeah.
So, of course, Li Keqiang during the ASEAN Summit also recognized the Marcos family and the contribution of the father in the early 1970s, no, in recognizing the founding of People's Republic of China. We have Secretary Roque. Sorry, I'm a bit biased, no, kasi he was my professor. He would let me sit in UP Law when I was an aspiring or thinking of doing law. So he would let me sit in. No, he was considered a terror prof, but his classes are always full. So Professor Harry Roque will take advantage of your presence today and try to dissect your mind on this crazy developments happening. How do you read? Sir, you're in mute. You're mute po, sir. I'm gonna ask you to unmute. Give us a few seconds. Sir, you're still mute po. Sir, you're paano ba 'to i-unmute, ha?
I think the host can do it. To unmute him and control them. Hindi niya
Sir, please accept my asking you to unmute.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
now.
You're on mute now, sir. Good to see you. Healthy and younger.
Thank you very much, Austin. I'm so sorry that I'm even very dressed informally because I just came from the Bureau of Quarantine a shot, no, for polio, since I'm going on a trip to Africa, no. But anyway, it's a pleasure to be here with you, and I think my views on the West Philippine Sea issue has been published and is very well known. However, I would like to focus now on the fact that in 2023, EDCA, or the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, is about to expire, and therefore we need now a vigorous national debate on whether or not we should in fact renew the EDCA. Let me begin by saying that I've always believed that the Mutual Defense Treaty is obsolete. It is obsolete because times have changed.
Oh,
EDCA, well, the treaty was entered into at the height of the Cold War, when we knew that there was a political conflict between the US. Can't even win a war with Ukraine, no? Despite the fact that it has boasted that it will crush Ukraine in a very short time. Meaning, the Cold War framework by which we entered into the Mutual Defense Treaty has ceased to exist. Today, the priority of countries is economic progress. They want food in the table of their countrymen, especially here in the Philippines. And today, while we used to view the Soviet Union and China as a threat because of ideological differences with the Americans, we now view particularly China and Russia as very important economic partners. And of course, trade as well as investments from China and Russia are very much welcome, because our priority now is to uplift the living standard of all Filipinos. So it is in this context that we have to re-examine whether or not we still need a mutual defense treaty, given that
Sir,
our
naging choppy po kayo. Can you
priorities
repeat what you said, the
the
last 1
West and
minute?
all the enemies, so-called enemies of democracy. Today, the issue.
Professor
Well,
Roque,
the last 1 minute,
can you
I
repeat
said
your last
that
1
today,
minute statement?
yes.
Naging choppy lang po. Can you repeat your last 1 minute statement?
Okay. I said so that I can understand. You can understand me. So as I said, the priority now of everyone, including China and Russia, is to bring food to the table of all their citizens. No? And that is why I think the Mutual Defense Treaty, because the conditions by which we adopted the Mutual Defense Treaty are no longer in existence, should also be re-examined in this regard. Now, having said that, the Mutual Defense Treaty has also proven to be inutile, because twice we have lost islands and the United States did not come to our rescue. We lost Mischief Reef, we lost Panatag Shoal. And yet, despite the fact that it is very clearly stated that when there is an armed attack on any of our territories, the US should come to our assistance, the United States failed to do so. So if the Mutual Defense Treaty has proven inutile in protecting the integrity of our territory, what is the point of the Mutual Defense Treaty? Another point that some commentators have said is that although the Mutual Defense Treaty allegedly says that the US will come to our assistance whenever we are under armed attack, still under US domestic law, they will have to comply with the constitutional requirement that Congress must in fact concur in the declaration of war before the United States can come to our assistance. To me, that's not too important a point, because as you know, the US has gone to war with or without US congressional approval, but they will do so if their national interests are threatened. Do I believe there's going to be a confrontation between the US and China? I don't think so. There is a relationship now of mutual interdependence between the United States and China. They are the biggest investors and biggest creditors to one another. I think it is foolish for either China or the United States to engage in war with each other, because it is a recipe for mutual
Professor Roque,
destruction.
sorry,
I
nagiging
think the
unstable
economic
ulit yung...
relationship between these two supergiants is now too intricate, suicide. I think it is too It will be foolish for US and the China to engage in a conflict now because they are too interdependent on one another. They're the biggest creditors and biggest investors in each state, and I don't think it is to their interest to actually engage in a shooting war with one another. Having said that, the reality is there is now a competition because the United States does not want to accept the reality that China has become an economic power and will, of course, have increased influence in the area. So there is a refusal, for whatever reason, for the United States to admit that they now have to deal with China because in the past, when China was not an economic giant that it is, they simply ignored China and proceeded like China did not exist. I think the Americans would have to come to terms that China is now a competitor as far as economic power is concerned, and they have to recognize her and deal with her as such. So what is now the implication of the visit of Vice President Harris here in Manila? From the point of view of the president, I think he was right in saying it's not a big deal. Because although there is a conflict in the West Philippine Sea, still Harris said that she will only visit Palawan, which without a doubt is not disputed as forming part of Philippine territory. But that's as far as the Philippine perception is concerned. The American perception is it is in fact important to send a message to China that the Philippines is still an ally and that the Americans are still the force to reckon with in the Asia-Pacific area. Take note, I said that this is the American perception because the president's perception that the trip is no big deal is valid as far as the Philippines is concerned because we are both friends to the US and China. And of course, the vice president's boarding a Philippine vessel to cruise along the waters of undoubtedly Philippine water should not mean any harm to any other country. But the Americans are wily. They know that despite this, they will still be sending a message to China that the Philippines remains a committed ally and that the Philippines, without a doubt, is on the side of the Americans in case of a shooting war with China. That is the American perception. Now, because of this American perception, the Chinese too have their perception, and you cannot blame China in thinking that the American perception, in fact, is the correct perception, and therefore the visit may constitute a threat to China. That is the Chinese perception because the conflict is between America and China. The Chinese, though, have not considered us as a problem area since President Duterte started friendly relations with China, and President Marcos has said unequivocally that China remains to be the most important partner of the Philippines. Now, I have to emphasize the differences in perceptions. President Marcos is correct in saying it's no big deal. But the Americans, without a doubt, consider it as significant because it reiterates that the Philippines is an ally in its confrontation with China, which is wrong because we have never perceived China as our enemy. And I do not blame China also if she were to think that because the Americans' perception is that the Philippines is an ally in the confrontation with China, that they should beware. So all I'm saying is perhaps, even if from the point of view of the Philippines it is no big deal, we should be more sensitive as far as the Chinese perception of the visit is concerned. And we need to accept that it is probably a valid perception as far as China is concerned. And the lesson to be learned is we must not allow ourselves to be used by the Americans again in their desire to send a message to China that they want to escalate tension in our region. Now, I don't think it is an accident that there was an incident in Pag-asa Island on the first day of the Vice President's visit. This must be because of what I perceive or what I explained as the Chinese perception. It is now sending a message that if the Philippines will really be an ally to the United States, then although we remain friends, that this may change. So I think the whole incident in Pag-asa yesterday sends the message that I hope Philippines, you become true to our friendship and you will not allow yourself to be used by the Americans in their desire to retain their hegemony in the region. Going back now to the EDCA, why do I think we should scrap EDCA? Number one, it violates the Constitution. It allows the prepositioning of equipment and military troops without a treaty required by the Philippine Constitution, duly concurred in by the Senate, duly recognized by the other party as a treaty, and where Senate requires it, submitted to a referendum to be approved by the people. Secondly, it is not pursuant to our interests. When we allow U.S. preposition equipment and troops in our country, which could be used in an aggressive war or confrontation with China, we allow our territory to be used in a manner injurious to another state, that is China. That makes the Philippines a legitimate target for military attack on the part of China as well. Unless it is our national interest to engage in war with China just because the Americans want to ensure the hegemony in the area, there is no utility to have the EDCA beyond 2023. Now, the reality is, if the president will scrap EDCA, if the president will scrap MDT, the president already has had personal knowledge of what the United States can do. They were spirited away from the Philippines in 1986 under the pretense that they were going to be brought to Ilocos. The Americans can remove the president if he will move to remove EDCA and the Mutual Defense Treaty at the same time. So my humble suggestion is to ensure that the Americans will not view the president as antagonistic to American interests. For now, let us keep the Mutual Defense Treaty. But by all means, we should not have EDCA beyond 20.
Sir, naging choppy po kayo. Just for everybody's information, si Sir Roque is actually en route. He's on the road, so his internet is fluctuating. Professor Roque, are you there? Professor Roque?
As in EDCA
Naging
itself.
choppy po kayo, sir. Can you repeat your last 1 minute line? About the EDCA should not be allowed to proceed beyond a certain point?
Yeah. No, I stopped. I stopped. Yes, I stopped. Now, I think that yeah,
Sir, you're very choppy now. You're basically in the red zone on your Wi-Fi. That's why we need more foreign partners, siguro, Ana,
think
no,
the
to improve
Americans
our
will
digital
accept.
infrastructure. Professor Roque,
I
you're
think the
very choppy
Americans will
now.
accept that we turn, because according to the visa law and EDCA, that's the anchor of EDCA. So we term.
Nawala na si Professor Harry Roque. Professor Butch, are you in the room? Ayun, nag-resign in.
Ayan,
Sir,
nag-resign.
naka-mute po kayo. I'm asking you to unmute.
Let me just conclude, no? Let me
Yes,
just
Sir,
conclude.
can you repeat,
that
sir?
I think,
Parang the last 2 minutes, sir, nawala eh. Can you
Yes,
repeat?
yes.
Okay na
Let
signal
me
nyo
just
ngayon. The last 2 minutes.
Okay, I think the Americans will accept if we were to terminate EDCA but retain MDT. Retaining MDT is only for the purpose of ensuring they do not topple President PBBM, which is what happened in 1986. I think they will accept that MDT is in place even if EDCA were not around, because in any case, they can come up with other provisional agreements. But what is important is we declare that under our independent foreign policy, we have no interest to engage in war with anyone. What we want is diplomatic relations that will result in increased prosperity for our countrymen. And because we are Filipinos, we believe in the saying, makipag-away ka na sa kamag-anak, wag lang sa kapitbahay. That's all that I have to say. Thank you, and I'm sorry about the bad internet connection.
Yeah, we're okay now, sir, with your signal. Professor Harry, a couple of questions from the media. I'll take the floor first, Anna, and then I know you have a few questions also. Professor Harry, you're already talking about the term the discontinuation of EDCA, but right now the main topic is 5 additional bases. What's your reading on this?
It's not 5 additional bases.
Uh, Unfortunately,
It
sir,
has
nawala po yung signal
been
ninyo ulit.
agreed upon pursuant to
Can
EDCA. The
you
five
repeat your answer?
bases is because of EDCA. And that is why what I'm saying is it is not to our national interest. Basis is because of EDCA. And that is why I think we should not continue with EDCA, because the presence of these 5 bases will make us a magnet for a military attack in case of a shooting war between the US and China. But I think for now, it is sufficient to have a mutual defense treaty to ensure that the Americans will not topple President PBBM, no? Because we have to learn from history. The Americans have toppled regimes, and they will do it again if they feel that it. So to placate them, let's continue to have the MDT, but we must scrap the EDCA.
You know, Anna, many people remember Sir Harry as a spokesperson, but many forget that he's also our international law expert and top constitutional mind, no? So we will take advantage of that. Professor Harry was also one of the petitioners questioning the EDCA, no? So Anna, I'll throw the next questions to you.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you so much, Professor Harry Roque, for that very enlightening. And I think I agree with him in on many points. No, like for example, we need to be sensitive to the issue of even right now allowing Harris to visit Palawan, because the perception is different. On our side, we're okay, we're very peaceful, but the two superpowers, they have different perception as well. But I think let me through the question, no, because I've read yesterday in a CNN article, actually it's a news piece, I think, that that there is this discussion of a civil nuclear cooperation deal between the United States and the Philippines. It's civil nuclear, no? That's just want to emphasize. And then it has been stated in that news article that once enforced, the so-called 123 agreement will provide the legal basis for U.S. exports of nuclear equipment and material to the Philippines, according to the White House. I know that this is civil nuclear cooperation, that much more about energy, but given the controversy in the South China Sea and the rivalry and geopolitical competition between the U.S. and China, and you have also the EDCA and the MDT, all of this taken us together. Do you think, Professor Harry, it would be good for us to have that partnership with the United States, or instead we can possibly choose other partners like South Korea, probably, or other that can also give us, like France, can also, provide us with the ability to harness nuclear energy for civil purposes, for energy purposes, not military. So what is your point, and what is your take on this issue, and what are your views in this regard, sir?
Well, I think it is correct for the Philippines to consider nuclear energy, because after all, almost all of the advanced economies of the world are utilizing it. And I think the lesson learned from the Ukraine conflict is we really need to have energy security. We cannot be dependent on imported fossil fuel, which is why we have revitalized effort now to expand our renewable, and we are now exploring nuclear energy. Nuclear energy per se is not bad. In the nuclear the nuclear exporting countries, nuclear energy, that is, like France, South Korea, and the United States. So I think the agreement being pushed by the United States ensures that they will have a competitive edge as far as the use of nuclear energy in the Philippines is concerned. Make no mistake about it, no? Nuclear energy is still a business. And right now, it's a fierce competition between South Korea, France, and the United States. So I think we can separate the issue of nuclear energy from an armed confrontation between China and the United States. But that is precisely what we seek to avoid, because, as you know, they are nuclear powers, no? And we must avoid another catastrophe that Japan has experienced during World War II. No? So I think we can rightfully separate the issue of nuclear energy from the ongoing tension in the West Philippine Sea. It's just business competing with one another.
Okay. Thank you,
Okay.
Professor Har.
Anna, we have Professor Butch Valdez. If we can bring him in, and I think Senator Kit Tatad was also logged in. I saw his grandson helping him. So please, Professor Butch Valdez, can we have you for a quick opening remark and maybe answer the two questions that were already asked?
Thank you, Professor Harry.
Thank you, Professor Harry.
Yeah.
Please stay tuned. No, there's a few more questions, sir. If you can stay with us, I know you're on the road. We'll ask you a couple more questions from the media.
Yes.
Go ahead, Professor Butch. Are you there?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for inviting me here. I'm sorry I'm a little late, but I
That's
guess
okay.
that
Yes. Thank you. Welcome.
I just got some of the last statements of Honorable Harry Roque, and by and large, of course.
Professor Butch, can you speak a little closer to your mic? I think it's a little bit. Yes. Okay.
Okay. I am by and large, of course, agreeable with what I was hearing from the Honorable Harry Roque, except just a little diversion from the discussion. I view this whole move of the United States to be have been planned not just now and increasing the controversy with China, West Philippine Sea, but it was a decision made by the United States as early as 2011. 2011. When Hillary Clinton came here about November of 2011 to announce to us that there will be increased U.S. presence in the Southeast Asian region. And by 2011 December, in a APEC summit in Singapore, President Obama actually tells our Noynoy Aquino that they would like to have use of our bases, air bases, and ports, all of our ports, when they shift their naval forces to the Southeast Asia, which President Noynoy agreed to. If you remember, in the Senate, this was vehemently objected to by the late Miriam Defensor Santiago, saying that agreement should not hold water because it needed Senate's ratification. Nevertheless, they were able to push through with this. It was also at the height of another issue that was overwhelming the Filipino people, which was the move to impeach the Chief Justice Corona. I view all of these things as somehow connected because the United States and Noynoy needed to have this very subservient Supreme Court because they knew that there will be certain moves that will be challenged as to its constitutionality. As you know now, the EDCA after that was being pushed. And if we had the same Supreme Court Chief Justice, most probably he would not have allowed it. But since it was Chief Justice Sereno, it was quite easy for Noynoy Aquino to get that EDCA agreement, which was obviously questionable, to push through. Subsequent to that, of course, the presence of the United States here in the Philippines and in our waters and in our territory was almost without question allowed by the Philippine government. Not just Noynoy Aquino, but President Duterte as well. No, just couldn't do anything with the installations of the U.S. in our Philippine military bases, and of course the use of our ports by the U.S. naval forces and their submarines and their warships and parked here all over the Philippines in territorial waters. Now, to me, this should have been enough. Warning on the part of the Philippine government that what was going to happen was going to happen. All of this time, Chinese government has been warning us since 2011 that this move of President Noynoy Aquino was going to make us a target in case there was a main conflict between China and the United States. The United States was moving not just to encircle China, but it was also moving at that time to encircle Russia, because that the encirclement was already planned during that period. And they knew that the two sovereign countries would be their biggest headache in trying to maintain their hegemony over the world. So we are here now again, still discussing the details of this and that, and our president, rather than taking a position and understanding that the country will really be at risk if we become a target we get caught in the crossfire between the United States and China, still takes a position that
bababa ako kaya lang nag
still takes a position that appeasement of both heads and trying to play the game of saying yes, I love you to the U.S. and yes, I love you to China as a method of foreign policy. I have my reservations with regard to this. I think a declaration of sovereignty is much more important now. And
Professor Butch, may I interject here? There's some questions from the media. Thank you for the opening remarks. You gave us a good overview. The question here from the media is: do you think that the 5 EDCA bases will be? How do you see that moving forward? The additional 5 EDCA bases. And can you? Some of our listeners are saying it's a bit soft. Is there a way to increase your microphone?
Yes. From the very beginning, I think the EDCA is unconstitutional, and there should be a move precisely to declare the EDCA agreement as unconstitutional. So not only should we disallow additional 5 bases, we should make a declaration that the previous 5 bases that they are in is unconstitutional, and it's an attack on our sovereignty. That should be, I think, our position. And it will not. I am not sure it will mean the ouster of President Marcos from office. President Marcos, if he takes these kinds of leadership role, might be even more enamored to the Filipino people and I believe if about 100 million Filipinos are backing him up, no, it will be very difficult to oust him. No? The old President Marcos was ousted, but he didn't have what the new President Marcos will have, which is China and Russia. No? At that time, only the United States was the superpower. But now, if the US pushes us in the way it, as you saw that they pushed Duterte. Duterte went to China and to Russia, and they were not able to do anything about it. And if they do that to Bongbong Marcos for saying that we are declaring the EDCA as unconstitutional, I don't think they will do anything to push us even closer to China or to Russia. Now, on the matter of the nuclear energy, I think that was a request on the part of the Philippines to get assistance from them, and they used it as a carrot, for us to agree to their requests on EDCA and so on and so forth. Because very easily we can get the very same as Anne had indicated, we can get the same and even better assistance on financial, technological, and whatever else that we get from other countries. South Korea is there, China is there, and Russia is there. Even India will be in a position to help us. So I am not too, well, I don't think that the US discussion on this nuclear thing is separate from the EDCA or other issues. They're connected. That's my view.
Now, one or two questions from Professor Butch, and former Senator Kit Tatad has joined us also. I believe we can ask him some inside stories also from his time as the youngest cabinet minister under President Marcos the Senior. So, Anna?
Yes, I have a question for Professor Boots. Do you think also, Professor, because Professor Harry Roque said earlier that we should not let EDCA be extended beyond 2023, because it's supposed to end, and even it's unconstitutional, as you have said, and I agree with you on that. But on the other hand, Professor Roque is saying that we can retain the MDT just to placate the United States. Do you have the same position, and do you have the same views on this?
Well,
thus far,
the declaration of the EDCA as unconstitutional to me is no longer debatable. I think there should be a move towards that. Now, the MDT, the Mutual Defense Treaty, is what needs to be reviewed. Because when we were using the MDT in discussions with the United States, if my memory serves me right, the US was the one who said the MDT does not mean that we will go to the aid of the Philippines in case the Philippines has territorial disputes with China. It was they who were holding back any commitment against China if we had territorial disputes, because they said that should be solved bilaterally. Now, it is now being used as if though it was something that we should be holding on to. I think that should be reviewed, and a statement from us to that effect, should also come out from our government.
Last question on my side before we ask Professor former Senator Tata to speak and give his opening remark. Professor Butch is like this now. And this is my last question for now. U.S. actually right now is eyeing to set up more temporary facilities. It's for its troops and equipment storage in the country, and it's the proposed location of the so-called 5 or additional EDCA bases is this, no? Cagayan, Zambales, Isabela, and Palawan. All of these are facing Taiwan, China, facing China, and facing even Korean Peninsula. And if you look at these areas, these are the 3 flashpoints of potential conflict in the South, in the Asia-Pacific region, or they call it Indo-Pacific region. What do you think should be the moves or the the policy move of our government, of President PBM? Do you really think we have to agree with this, or we just have to say that, this is not the way forward for us? I'm sorry. So what is your views on these things? Because these are very, how do you call that, critical, and also very provoking, it's vis-a-vis China. These are very close. This is the other side of the South China Sea, actually.
Yeah.
The question can be answered by all of the or any of the experts after Professor Butch, please.
Yes. Well, my position is still very clear that the whole thing, since it's unconstitutional, you don't even need to debate any of these things anymore. No? As you had said that all of these things are pointed at China, no? And yet the pretext is they're putting up this EDCA thing supposedly to help us in natural calamities. No? I mean, who's making some? Are they making us stupid, or are we really stupid to believe that? No? So this is enough. We are already facing a major crisis in the world. There is an actual threat of a nuclear conflict between the superpowers. No? Taiwan is at issue. North Korea is at issue. No? And of course, the escalation with NATO in that part of the world. No? Now, we should stop playing games. No? And decide as to whether we're going to take the side of the Philippines or otherwise. We have to assert our sovereignty and tell the people, like the United States, that they are not welcome. Their warships and war material are not welcome here in the Philippines. And of course, give the same kind of warning to China, that we are a sovereign country and we plan to assert ourselves with our people and with our military in every sort of way.
We'll get back to you on that, Professor Butch. Professor Harry Roque raised his hand. Yes, sir. Please, asking you to unmute.
Now, on the point of Butch, Jovi and I questioned the constitutionality of EDCA. We lost because according to the Supreme Court, the treaty that was ratified by both the Philippine Senate and the U.S. Senate is the Mutual Defense Treaty, and the ADCA merely implements the Mutual Defense Treaty, which of course I don't agree with, but what can you do? It has been decided by the Supreme Court and is now stare decisis. Perhaps now that they are implementing EDCA, we can go back to court and say, see, the result of EDCA is a basic agreement, as in fact, they now have unimpeded use of 5 of our camps. But the defense there is, well, they have prepositioned equipment. It's not tantamount to actual basing, which I think is wrong still. But I just wanted to highlight that Jovi Salonga and I, in fact, questioned it, and the Supreme Court did not rule in our favor. That's point 1. Point 2 is, I fully sympathize with my good friend here when he says we should assert Philippine sovereignty. But I'm talking about real politics. And I think after 2 years in government, I know what real politics is about. You're talking about the same lawyer who sent Pemberton to jail, but because we needed vaccines for COVID, I had to swallow everything and pretend that I did not care that Pemberton was given pardon. No? Of course, it hurt me a lot, but I knew it was for a bigger interest. And that's the kind of real politics that we're talking about. If we're going to put an end to both EDCA and MDT, the Americans will surely take steps to remove PBBM in the same way that they already removed past presidents, and will install a puppet government. Preferably, I think that puppet government is currently in Harvard as we speak. No? So it's real politics. How to deal with the realities of the world, that the United States will take steps to end democratic regimes if we completely oppose their interests, and at the same time how to as much as we could advance the cause of Philippine sovereignty. But this is not a perfect world. I understand that, no? But there are realities we need to live by.
Again, no, thank you for our resource speakers. We have Professor Butch Valdez of Citizen National Guard and Katipunan Demokratiko. We also have a former spokesperson, but more famously known as an international law expert and a constitutionalist, Professor Harry Roque. And that might be a good segue to former Senator Kit Tatad, who I think Professor Roque has a few more years than you in government. So maybe we can hear some of the real politic behind the scenes. Senator Kit Tatad, are you there? Sir Kit Tatad, are you there?
Yes, I think he is. I think he is. He just need to unmute himself and then
okay,
speak,
sige.
or
I'll
we can unmute him as co-host or host. Yeah.
Sir, I'm asking you to unmute. Please unmute.
Thought I did.
You're on, sir. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Good morning to all of you. I'm so honored to be in the company of my two favorite intellectuals, Harry Roque and Butch Valdez, and all our other friends here. I'm sorry I had trouble with my device earlier this morning. I could not join on time, but I had to borrow my wife's computer to be able to come here. I'm supposed to make an opening statement, but I missed the early part of the discussion, so I'd appreciate it, Austin, if you could update me, bring me up to speed. What has been said? What are the two questions that must be addressed?
Anna, would you like to?
Yeah. Let me summarize a little of what Professor Harry Roque, Senator Tatad, and also Professor Butch Valdez have given us and shared with us. No, first, what Professor Harry Roque highlighted earlier is the sensitivity part, especially when it comes to perception. China will have a different perception, especially with reference to the visit of VP U.S. Vice President Harris to the Philippines, and she's still here, and she plans to go to Palawan. And on the other hand, also the perception and of course the position of the United States. But our position, we don't have problem with these countries. We're friends, and we don't want any problem with both of them. We just pursue our relations with them and in a peaceful manner. So that's actually one of the sharing of Professor Harry Roque. And then another one, I think, Senator Tatad, is we should not allow the country to be a pawn of the U.S. in whatever adventurism they would want to do in the Indo-Pacific region. The other one is a shared perception as well of Professor Butch and I think Professor Harry Roque, that EDCA has to stop, or EDCA should not be extended beyond 2023 precisely because it's unconstitutional. And if in any case, the proposal of Professor Harry Roque is we do away with EDCA, but we try to placate the United States of having still the MDT so that a regime change as against to our current mahal na Pangulo, PBBM, will not happen because as he said, the United States are very much famous when you talk about regime change in many different countries. And also, Professor Butch was emphasizing a declaration of sovereignty is more important and is very important for us. And also the declaration that 5 EDCA bases existing, not the one that are being lobbied at the moment, are also unconstitutional. And we should stop playing game according to Professor Butch Valdez. So these are the points that has been have been shared by the two experts. And so far, we also asked them questions as what are their views with regard to the lobby of the United States of having more additional EDCA bases in the country, and then what's their perception of the visit of VP Harris to Palawan, and about the civil nuclear energy that's being offered by the United States to help us with our energy problem. And so that's basically the discussion, Senator Tatad. And probably it will be good if you can give us also your views on these issues, and at the same time you can also deliver your opening statement. And then probably after that we will be asking you questions as well. And of course the rest of the speakers will chime in and will also share their answers to the questions that we'll be asking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We now have Vice President Harris with us. I don't believe we should overstate the importance of this visit. Vice President Harris perhaps is looking at the next presidential American elections, and whether she might run for president or not depends on any number of things. The Philippine visit might help, in the same manner that Speaker Nancy Pelosi probably wanted to project herself as a presidential candidate when she came here. But the real issue is the EDCA. Now, I agree with what I've heard so far, that we have to let go of the EDCA. I share the view of Butch Valdez, and did Harris say the same thing, that this is unconstitutional. Under our Constitution, no international agreement is valid unless and until ratified by the Philippine government with the concurrence of the Senate, with its 2/3 vote at least. And you have the Section 25 of Article 18, which says that after the expiration in 1991 of the agreement between the Philippines and the United States concerning military bases, foreign troops, and facilities shall not be allowed in the Philippines except under a treaty, duly concurred in by the Senate, and when Congress so requires, ratified by a majority of the votes cast by the people in a national referendum held for that purpose and recognized by the other contracting state as a treaty. Two constitutional provisions, which EDCA bypassed in 2014. The term used is agreed locations. This, I believe, is a euphemism for bases. In case of war, and the Americans start using these agreed facilities, we will be able to see that they'll be functioning as nakedly as possible as military bases. We won't get involved there. They would be running these agreed facilities independently on their own without any participation of the Philippine government. So I think we should hold on to the constitutional issue in the same manner that in the United States, for 50 years, they questioned the ruling on Roe versus Wade. They didn't give up. And this year, the Supreme Court finally decided there is no constitutional right to abortion. And so Roe versus Wade went out of the legal considerations of the American people. I think we can maintain the same position with respect to EDCA. Now, the termination clause of EDCA says it will be valid for the next 10 years from 2014, and after that, it will be indefinitely enforced. So it's not easy unless we act now. We cannot get rid of EDCA. And I hope our good friend Harry Roque will agree to this observation that, mahirap kung hindi tayo gagalaw. Now, what other issues do you want us to cover? Do you have 5 bases and agreed
Senator
facility?
Tatad, hello,
Yes,
can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes. Question from the media. Do you assess PBBM's foreign policy as a shift from the previous independent foreign policy announced by former President Duterte?
No, the Philippine independent foreign policy is enshrined in the Constitution. It is in the Constitution long before President Duterte became president. President Duterte made a point of stressing this particular provision more strongly than any other president had. But President Bongbong has reiterated it in his own way by saying the Philippines will be a friend to all, an enemy to none. That is a statement of independence. And I don't believe he's shifting from that. He has received Vice President Harris, and I hope she's having a good visit. But he's also met with President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of APEC in Bangkok, and he'll be meeting with the president in China when he makes a state visit in January. So I do not see any shift. In the case of his father, President Ferdinand Marcos, in 1975, there was an embargo, a diplomatic embargo by the free world bloc on the socialist bloc countries. But Marcos went ahead to establish relations with China in 1975 and relations with Russia in 1976. So he was balancing relations with the opposing blocs in the world. So it's too early to have a shift. And besides, we have not heard about what commitments the president has made to Vice President Harris and what the United States has committed to the Philippines on this visit. So I think we can afford to wait, find out. Let's hear what we are going to be told. Then we can analyze.
Thank you for your enlightening and honest opinions and insights. Anna, we're very lucky because we not only have the experts in this evolving topic, but we also have the young at heart, the institutional knowledge that we hope that we can also learn from and gain insights moving forward. Anna, if you have a question from the media.
Yeah, but before I think questions, it would be nice for us to read as well the comments and the chat box, Austin. So
That's good,
for
yes,
our
please.
experts as well to know the perception and the thoughts of our audience. No, let me read some
Sure.
of the comments. No, Herman Laurel from Kamintong. U.S. cannot launch a successful coup anymore. It's more likely PBBM is playing up to the Americans for the return of some Marcos properties. The children are not as profound as the old man. I think old man is referred to former President Senior, no, the senior. In fact, PBBM showing how cheap he is. His way in trying to navigate to the US, but it's something like that. So probably later we can ask the reaction, no, of our expert on this very provoking statement of Kamintong. And the other
And
one
we
is
have Senator Kit Tatad here. He was the youngest cabinet minister of the father. So maybe we get some chismis also.
And now one
For
of
those
the
who stay-
oldest surviving.
I'm the only surviving. Yeah.
Austin, if you don't mind, I'd like to return a bit to the issue of the MDT,
Okay.
which Harry says
Go ahead, Sir
we should
Kit.
keep in order to humor the United States. I believe we can keep the MDT, even with the framework of Bongbong Marcos's being a friend to all and an enemy to none, by making sure that it remains strictly a defense alliance. Under the MDT, an attack on Philippine forces will be considered as an attack on the US, and the US will respond. And an attack on the US forces will be considered an attack on Philippine forces, and we are supposed to respond. But the real question is, if the attack comes from the US, what do we do? Are we involved?
Yes.
For instance, in Taiwan, if the US attacks China, are we going to go in there and take a number? So this is the real issue. So we have to revisit the MDT just to make sure that it remains a defense alliance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Continue, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Professor, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question on that, since it's all about the MDT, and I think our experts have shared their equally very interesting point of view, no? Especially, like, for example, Professor Harry saying, like, just to placate, which is in real politics also, you need to deal with this kind of dynamics, because real politics is very different when you talk about politics in just discussion, no? I understand him very much, but on the other hand, I also agree that we need to think about the MDT. How long I know that this is obsolete already. And also we need to revisit this as much as we can. Now, in view of that revisit or reassessment of the MDT, I am very much interested to know, this is my question already, not just the media, no? Is what are the provisions specifically in that MDT that needs to be changed or amended that would make it more mutual or balanced and more favorable to the Philippines, not necessarily favorable to the United States? But because the Mutual Defense Treaty, if you really take a look at it, it's not really a mutual agreement. It's more favorable to the United States. And even the question that, what if America is the one attacking another country? What we gonna do? Do we need to join America? It's not our business in the very first place. We did not do it. So how are we gonna go through the revision or reassessment of the MDT if we cannot do away with it at the moment? Because we also have to look at real politics, no? And Professor Harry Roque has raised his hand, sir. Please.
Professor,
Yes.
I'll ask you to unmute. Professor Harry, I've asked you to unmute.
Yes. The definition of an armed attack did not exist in 1950s when we entered into the MTT. The definition of an armed attack was expounded by the International Court of Justice in Nicaragua versus United States. And today, the armed attack is defined as the sending of regular armed forces into the territory of another state. If not regular armed forces, then of the same scale and scope as if conducted by regular armed forces. You can see that the MDT definition of an armed attack is very much different now from the definition given by the ICJ in the Nicaragua case. So the first and foremost amendment is we have to refine the meaning of an armed attack, because an attack, for instance, against our ship in Ayungin may not be an armed attack pursuant to the decision of the ICJ. And the US may just invoke it. Even if the Chinese were to tow that old derelict ship away from Ayungin, the meaning of armed attack is very clear. Sending of regular armed forces, if not regular armed forces, of the same scale and scope as if conducted by armed forces. And in the context of Nicaragua, the court said that financing the Contras would not suffice to attribute the act of the Contras to the United States, meaning there was not really an armed attack to speak of as far as the financing of the Contras were concerned. So that's one, because our problem is we could lose territories, and there need not be the scale and scope contemplated by the ICJ in defining an attack in Nicaragua versus the United States. Secondly, the scope of application. if you look at the language of the MDT,
My wife,
really, South Pacific, the West Philippine Sea Islands may not be covered by it. Because the definition of the geographic application does not mention the West Philippine Sea. And this is partly because there was still no raging controversy over the West Philippine Sea in 1952. Yes, we had a claim because of Tomas Cloma, but in 1952, it was not acrimonious. Of course, there was already an issue because after World War II, Japan relinquished its title to Ito Aba in particular, but did not specify to whom. We wanted to be appointed as trustee for the islands. We were not given that in the Potsdam Conference. No, so we need to ensure that an attack on any of our islands that we currently occupy will be considered an armed attack for purposes of provoking the activation of the Mutual Defense Treaty. No, so those are two very important things that we need to redefine. Because, as I said, this is already history. The US has said that it will not take part in any ongoing conflict over territory. They have said this officially when we lost the Mischief Island as well as Panatag Shoal. No? So the kind of rhetorics we're getting from the United States now is very different from what they have said at the height or at the time, in point in time when we needed the United States the most. Thank you.
While you're on that topic, Professor Harry, any lessons from Ukraine? We're seeing live what is happening to Ukraine. Any lessons for the Philippines? For any of our experts, Professor Harry, maybe you can start while you were on that topic.
Well, the lesson is, again, from our Filipino saying, ang sakit ng kalingkingan ay sakit ng buong katawan. We cannot be oblivious to any armed conflict, wherever the armed conflict may be, because we know we will all be affected. As in fact, we're now facing 2023 with a very, very viable threat of recession because of the economic crisis brought about by the conflict. Second is, Russia is no longer a big a threat as we thought she is. It is now China. I think the focus is now on China because Russia is even invoking assistance from China. And of course, I think as far as diplomacy is concerned, Russia has been relying very much on the support of China. And third is lesson that we need to reassess our concept of self-defense. I am not legitimizing the use of force of Russia, as in fact, I've always asserted that under the UN Charter, unilateral use of force is illegal. But the point I'm driving at is when it is Russia engaged in unilateral use of force, the Europeans and the Americans are condemning. But when it was the Americans and the Europeans utilizing illegal use of force in Iraq and in other parts of the world, they were saying they are in compliance with international law. The law should apply to all. And that is why we should not recognize any exceptions to the prohibition on unilateral use of force. That is the only way we can maintain peace and order in current world situation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Harry Roque. Yes, the other expert also can share their perspective on the questions, no, that was thrown, no. But I agree, no. Just to summarize, two of the most important, I think, possible amendment to the MDT as we revisit. I hope we have to revisit that. Is the redefinition of what you mean by armed attack, and the other one is the scale and scope of the MDT, like especially on the issue of the South China Sea dispute. So yes, and also actually there are two questions posted by our audience, no, and which is very interesting. Just let me read it. Like the first one is: do you think President Marcos Jr. will be willing to repeal EDCA? The other one is: what is making the Philippines so tied up, I think, with the MDT or the Mutual Defense Treaty if it has lapsed already? So those are two questions posted by the audience. So any of our experts can actually address them.
Well, if you were to ask the president's uncle, who is our ambassador to Washington, of course, the uncle will say we need to renew it. And as correctly pointed out by Senator Tatad, if we renew it beyond 2023, it will never lapse. So if you ask him, he will say that. But if you were to ask another person like Professor Claire Carlos or myself, then we will say the MDT is enough, because after all, the Supreme Court said that the treaty basis for the EDCA is the MDT anyway. So I don't think the Americans have anything to worry about for as long as the MDT is in place. And yes, let us renegotiate the MDT. On the but whether or not the president will extend it, well, we're about to see. But there's going to be a very controversial and very loud debate between the uncle, possibly the House Speaker, and everyone else on this issue. No, but on the second question is, any second question?
Um, what is making the Philippines so tied up with the MDT? And that's the second. I
Well,
think you
it's
have addressed
reality.
both. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I have
reality.
addressed that. I have addressed that. I really think that if the president will do away with MDT, and I want to do away with the MDT, then the Americans will perceive him as a political enemy, and I don't want that as of yet, because he still has 5.5 years to go on this term.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Professor Roque. Yes, Senator Tatan is smiling and laughing. Sir, what do you think, and what are your views of these questions posted to all of you, the experts? Again,
Well, I'm very much with Secretary Roque here, but I was smiling when he said he still has 5.5 years.
Which is true. Which is true.
Which is true.
No, I just can I add something?
Yes, Professor Boots.
Well, your latest question. I had some comments about the previous question, but your latest question is what does President Marcos do? What is his thinking? What is his policy going to be? Well, with the assumption that, of course, he has not yet really stated his real foreign policy. I just wanted to remind people that not too long ago, maybe about less than about a month ago, his acting defense secretary already had indicated to the defense secretary of the United States that in case the U.S. goes to war with China for Taiwan, on the issue of Taiwan, the Philippines will be on their side, on the U.S. side. This I found so revolting for somebody to make a statement like that when we don't know yet what our policy should be. In the last meeting, I also remember when in the trip of the president to the U.S., our foreign secretary had made indications as well, favoring the United States over China with regard to the Taiwan issue. Now, just recently, first of all, these two statements being made by the cabinet members were already disconcerting as far as I was concerned. But just recently, I had a whiff of hope because I heard the extemporaneous comments being made by President Bongbong Marcos in his short discussion with President Xi Jinping. And he was telling President Xi Jinping that the Philippines will abide by the one China policy. And the only one China policy means one China, two systems, which means a recognition of China being of Taiwan being the province of China. Secondly, all he said that we would like to enhance our relationship with regard to agriculture, energy, and so on and so forth. But this to me was indicative already of what he was saying, because the position of the United States is very ambiguous with regard to the one China policy, despite the fact that more than a decade ago, more than several decades ago, they already recognized the one China policy, which was actually culminated by the ouster of Taiwan from the United Nations. Now, this is where I am not too comfortable. The two cabinet members of the president saying something and the president saying another thing. I am sure that President Xi Jinping, in this coming meeting in January, will hold our president to task, to his word, that he iterated this statement. One China, two systems, one China policy. This will be different from what the US later on will be saying.
Yeah, actually.
Professor Butch and Professor Kit Tatad. Yes, before there was a specific direct question for Sir Kit. You had an article on Manila Times, also a famous columnist, a challenge to ASEAN. Can you share how our ASEAN neighbors are managing the great powers rivalry? And maybe you can give us a short summary, Professor Kit Tatad, of what ASEAN can do, given the two elephants fighting.
Well, ASEAN is the world's best performing regional organization today.
Yes.
Even Professor Ishor Mahobani of Singapore agrees with that. And for that reason, he says that ASEAN should really get the Nobel Peace Prize rather than perhaps Maria Ressa, no? But it has not done much. I wrote my column in an effort to stimulate the desire among the ASEAN leaders to go up front there and do something, trying to make the peace rather than side with one or the other. The greater effort and achievement would be to try to build the peace. And it would be wonderful if it should emanate from Asia and from the Southeast Asian countries. Okay, now, but I have a short comment to make regarding the statement attributed to Faustino earlier about Taiwan. I had to investigate because I was a bit worried. I was as worried as our other friends here about, and the CIO and rather an OIC trying to announce that we would be fighting shoulder to shoulder with the Americans in case there's trouble in Taiwan. It turns out that this statement was falsely attributed to Faustino. He never made the statement. He stayed within the parameters proposed by the president on this issue. And on this issue, we should all remember that it was President Marcos. President Marcos was one of the first, if not the first, who adopted the one China policy when we decided to normalize relations with China. And the only condition I remember that he imposed in connection with this was that China would stop providing logistical support to the Communist Party of the Philippines. And I think China complied with that commitment. Now, since President Marcos announced his foreign policy of being a friend to all and an enemy to none, I have been urging him to try to operationalize this almost heavenly vision of foreign policy, friend to all, enemy to none. Let us try to operationalize it and see how it works. Until we see how it works, we will continue to have doubts and debates on this issue. Taiwan has become a so-called self-governing island state, democratic. But the issue of having a one country, so two systems has not changed. In the early days of the United Nations, we have the principle of decolonization. Colonies became independent when the natives decided to become independent. And they invoked the principle of self-determination. What happened to that principle? Is that still alive today? I think the Taiwanese should ask that question. And they should be able to resolve it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Tatad. Yes, I have a question to our two experts here, because Professor Harry Roque has to leave. I think he is on the road at the moment. So yeah, but still we have Professor Boots and also Senator Tatad. With my conversation with some international experts as well on geopolitics and enthusiasts of international relations abroad, one of their perception is this, that the U.S., given the so many pronouncements coming from some officials of government, is shifting or pivoting to the United States as against to China. That's the perception of some people abroad, And so it means like it's changing. It's kind of it's pivoting, from what Duterte did, because Duterte actually catalyzed the deepening friendship with China, given the Aquino administration we have zero diplomatic policy because of what happened in Scarborough Shoal. So Duterte shifted and tried to have that established and very good relation with China. And now the perception of some people abroad or some international experts is that, the Philippines is pivoting to the United States. Do you think this is true? But do you think this is just a perception, given that there are confusing, sometimes I agree with Professor Boots, there are confusing statements coming from some officials of government. So, and it becomes, an issue as well for other people to really see the stand of the United States, the stand of the Philippines vis-a-vis the United States and China. So what is your view? Do you agree with this view, or it's just a perception of some people without that much basis? Yes, anyone can start. Yes, sir, please.
Perhaps some people feel it's part of their DNA, how many Filipinos have migrated to the United States? How many Filipino families here have relatives in the United States? So, how many Filipinos try to speak English better than the Americans? These are some of the issues involved. We tend to be very close to the United States, and we mistake all types of relationship for the overall ties between the two countries. But we have our national interest, and we have to define those interests. Nobody else is going to fight for those national interests except Filipinos.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I agree, of course, with what the good senator has been saying. But the United States is no longer what it was before. And maybe it is the nature of the United States to be changing when there are changes in leadership. In this particular case, the present group of leadership in the last so many decades has already shown to the rest of the world that the United States, together with Great Britain, aim to promote their hegemony and control of the world, not militarily, but economically. The situation has changed because, again, over the last decade or so, the economic system that the United States and Great Britain had implemented for the world to follow is now in the process of collapsing. And history will tell you that when such systems, monetary, financial and economic systems start to collapse, countries that are affected tend to go militarily against each other. This was true in World War I and also true in World War II, and may be true in World War III. Now, if history will teach us anything, it is this lesson that we must all fully understand. War and nuclear conflict can be avoided because that is what human beings can do. They can change their minds. But we have to influence these world leaders that might is not right. Because you are very powerful militarily does not mean that you are going to do what is right for humanity. Now, everything that has been happening has a bigger picture. We tend to discuss smaller issues, but we lose the sight of where the world is going now. It is not a joke for 100 million Filipinos to die after 2 or 3 nuclear bombs hit our country. And probably the rest of the world will be suffering as well. So it is up to us to do everything we can to try to stop it. But how can we do that? Well, we are a small country, but we still have a voice. There was a time in 1955, I think, that a conference was organized in Indonesia called the Bandung Conference, setting up an organization of non-aligned countries, non-aligned movement countries. Mm-hmm. The Philippines was not even invited to be a member of that because we were, from all perceptions, still part of the United States. But that non-aligned movement was developed because of the perception that the US and the Soviet Union were going to go to war, and that countries were being pulled to side one against the other. But about 100 different countries then, including China, because Zhou Enlai was a figure during that time, made their voices felt, whether or not it was material in stopping a shooting war and just allowed a Cold War to ensue. That is for other analysts to figure out. But what I'm trying to say here is we, as a foreign policy of this country, should not be silent. It is not enough to say that we are a friend to all and an enemy of none. We must initiate the organization something akin to that movement, so that there is an active participation of all countries. And the solutions presented will be in the direction of economic development for the whole world. Again, something similar to the Belt and Road Initiative. If I were the one making any suggestions to the president, I will not tell him or talk to him about real politics. I will not ask him to try to save his presidency for the next 5.5 years. I'm going to ask him to make his contribution, not just to the Philippines, but to the whole world.
Touching on that, Professor Butch and Senator Kit Tatad, China's cooperation with Indonesia has successfully, it's going to complete the first high-speed train that will cut the 4-hour travel time to, I think, 45 minutes from Jakarta to one of the coastal capitals of Indonesia. And then, of course, the Laos-China train that made the landlocked Laos to a land-linked country. And then, of course, billions of investments in Cambodia and even Vietnam. The first city subway came from China's cooperation. Of course, the Philippines got millions of doses of vaccines donations. We have billions of investments and donations of the Manila's 2 new bridges. Do you foresee China's investments or interest on the Philippines possibly being affected with PBBM's shift or what's the right word? Enhanced relationship with the U.S.
Or it's
Senator
much
Kit
more
Tatad, Professor.
vacillation. Yeah, because PBBM, the way other people is seeing him right now is there's a vacillation, no, between China and US. When he is talking with the US, he says these things on it. This is the perception of some people, not my perception. Okay, just to be correct about this. So, how do you, in connection with the question of Austin, I think, do you think it will be affected? I mean, like
Well, I have a different take on all of this. There, so many people would like to see war between the US and China. And so they want us to be on the side of the United States because they believe it's a technologically superior country and that it could win the nuclear war where nobody else would win anything, where everyone loses. What I'd like to see is the Philippines, articulating and advancing its own interests, trying to balance the relationship with the competing powers and becoming a force to reckon with. I agree with Butch. We don't have to initiate anything new, Butch. Similar to the non-aligned movement, we can do a lot to regenerate the once active and powerful NAM, National Aligned Movement.
Yeah.
This began with the likes of Bros Tito, Nasser, Nehru, Sukarno, and all the others.
Yeah.
It is time to revive this movement. And we need new leaders. Ferdinand Marcos Jr. can begin to push and try to lead the formation of a new group of leaders.
Yeah.
Will stay on the side of peace and progress.
Okay.
This is my own take on this. I mean, It's not America who should win. It's not China that should win. It's all of us that should win.
Yeah. I agree, no? I totally agree with both experts that we should have that organization or groupings or revive the Bandung agreement that, we have that non-aligned. I think that will be, how do you call that? An arbiter in the middle of so many geopolitical tensions going on at the moment, and to solidify that, like a country like the Philippines should be non-aligned and neutral in all of these things. I have to read one interesting comment coming from our audience, no? Coco Maximo, which is very interesting comment, and Coco said, like, I wholly agree with Senator Kit Tata that neutrality and the independent foreign policy are sweet-sounding words like music to the ears. I feel, though, that these ideals are very impractical for the Philippines. In the context of the evolving world order and incoming multipolarity, I think it would be best if we choose side with China and Russia. The Philippines should push for pan-ASEAN combined Asia for Asians. So this is the comment, very interesting comment from Coco Maximo. And I think for me, my thing is like, I kind of agree, no, Asia for Asians, but that one I agree with. Yeah, Asia for Asians. What do you think, Senator Tata, with that comment?
The choice is between war and peace.
Yes.
Between life and death.
Yes.
So, do we choose to die with whom? I think the choice is to live with all others. I think that's the wrong choice.
Yeah.
Some people are so consumed with technological progress and thermological wars. I mean, that's not for us.
And another interesting comment too. No, I'm from one of our audience. I am thinking with Secretary Roque's response and Senator Tatan, the two factors why the Philippines remains subservient to the U.S. until today is the colonial mentality and the fear of U.S. retaliation. So that's very interesting. Also, comment from our audience. But I think I would agree. No, the choice is between peace and war, and of course we should choose peace above all else, because that's our national part of our national interest. And I think, and we cannot disrupt the economic progress and development that's going on in our region. We call it Asian century at the moment, no? So let's choose peace as much as possible. Yes, any comment from you, Austin, and questions on my side? It's like exhausted.
By the way, my articulate and elegant co-host is the Vice President for Externals of the Asian Century think tank. So we are in good company. And of course, Professor Butch and Senator Kit Tatad, we are sharing generously very important and very balanced advocacy. No? And just to let everybody know, we have over 95% of our audience are still with us, no? So we're really engaging our audience. If there are questions from the audience, you may type them or you can raise your hand and we'll let you ask your questions directly. And Senator Tata, this is the first time you joined us. Thank you for joining us. We're also known to have Chika moments at the end of our talks, so we can accept personal questions. We also have educators and students here who are interested in foreign policy, international development. So we hope you'll be able to entertain a few of our questions. The first question is for Senator Kit Tatad. Were you part of the thinking of President Marcos Sr. when he sent the engineer battalion to Vietnam, when the U.S. called us to join Vietnam, the Vietnam War? Can you give us some...
What happened there was President Marcos was asked to host a summit of the Vietnam War allies in Manila, and he did so.
Sorry, who asked him?
President Johnson, Lyndon Baines Johnson. He hosted a very successful Vietnam War Ally Summit in Manila. It's gathered all the allies, 7 war allies here. in the course of the summit, or the conclusion of the summit, Johnson tried to strong arm President Marcos into sending Filipino combatants to Vietnam. Marcos, being a gracious host, could not completely refuse him. So it's all in my book. All is Grace. That's an autobiography. I relate the summit there. In the end, Marcos decided to send non-combatants, the PhilCag. And who was the head of the PhilCag then? President Ramos was a captain or major in that group. No, so we were present, but we did not have to bear arms against fellow Asians. That was the most important thing for Marcos. The war involved the US and Asians. We would be there to help those who needed help, the wounded in battle, the hungry in battle, everybody, but never to bear arms against anyone. That's why if you listen to the stories coming from the late President Ramos and such guys as Colonel Jose Almonte, you would hear that the Vietnamese looked at the Filipinos with so much love and respect because of that.
It was also during the time of President Marcos Sr. when ASEAN was founded. Can you share how that came to fruition? It was the father of the late President Ramos as well.
Well, he was. I was a newspaperman at the time, and I covered Foreign Secretary Narciso Ramos. Well, in the beginning, we had the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization. It went away. We had the Mafilindo. We had ASA. And then we needed an organization that would put together all the Asian leaders. The Secretary Ramos at the time suggested an organization called SHARC, SHARC, Southeast Asia Association, Cooperation, etc. But it didn't sound too good. So they had to look for SHARC. They looked for another name. And eventually they came upon, they decided to call it the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Well, it's a long story. No? There are many details there, but we don't have the time for it now.
Austin.
We will have another session for that interesting stories. Professor Ana Malindog, any additional questions?
Yes, no, not a question anymore, but just to for our audience also's comment not to be heard. Kasi very interesting.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah,
yes,
this is from J. Victor
comments.
Co. When your sovereignty came from the citizen of the country and you do have the mindset of upholding their supreme national interest, then the path to neutrality, advocating peace will be the correct path to go. It may sound easier said than done, but the balancing act is really important here. And I guess the Philippine leaders realizes this and make sure we are chasing what's best for our people. The underlying threat of practicing and threatening the legitimacy of our government as US is basically capable of this should be exposed when they threaten to do so. We should not be put into a place where anyone should dictate what we have to do for our country. So far, the independent foreign policy has to continue with being enemy to none and being friend to everyone. And I do hope the MDT should be reevaluated and EDCA shouldn't be imposed on us. So that's from one of our audience. Very interesting and I think very nationalist and commentary. from the discussion that we have right now at the moment.
Yeah. May I add something?
Yes,
Yes,
of
sir.
course. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to also say that neutrality by itself should not be the goal. The neutrality by itself, to say that we don't want to side with the powers that be in case of this, is not the goal. The goal is peace. And peace which can be achieved only through economic development, for all countries. That is the goal. In the non-aligned movement in 1955, there I was looking at the meetings and resolutions. It did not talk about. It talked about politics and ideology, but it did not talk about a global economic development. Now is the chance. Now is our chance to do something like this. And our president is in the best position, being newly elected and very popular leader right now in Southeast Asia. And everybody's, of course, watching out what he's going to say, and watching out that he is really a chip of the old block. So I believe that if he says this and takes a proactive role in organizing a movement of nations, which is already, by the way, there to speak of. They are just not fully organized as such. And using economic development as proposed by the other powers as the solution to lasting peace, then we would have made our mark in world history, and Bongbong would be one of the greatest presidents that ever lived, if he's able to do this.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Bush. I think that would be a positive note to end our forum today. We would love to have lunch with everybody soon. Professor Butch Valdez, if you have a closing remark, or Senator Kit Tatad, 1 or 2 minute closing remark, and we will reserve some of the questions via email, and we look forward to the next session together. Professor Bush, did you want to give a closing remark, and then Senator Kit Tatad, and then I'll pass it on to Anna?
Well, I would like to thank you for the privilege of allowing us to share our views on these very, very important issues. And I think there should be more of this, because these issues are not just academic issues, but they are real issues which our people must be informed and know about. This is not just for political debate or debate on of so-called intellectuals. This is an issue that all people must be embracing and looking for a solution collectively. Thank you.
Senator Kit Tatad.
Well, I concur with everything that Butch has said. We need this forum to discuss the real issues that concern our people. There is no time for partisanship, but we need public opinion to be alive. We have to ask questions that need to be asked, discuss issues that need to be discussed, and propose solutions, however difficult they may sound, so that they might be considered by those who are in a position to implement those decisions. So I like to congratulate Austin and his co-hosts for initiating this forum. And I'd like to assure you that you can always count on us to be with you whenever we are needed. Thank you very much.
And please follow Senator Kit Tatad's weekly column on Manila Times. Always an engaging read.
3 times a week.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's 3 times a week. It's not weekly.
Three times a
on the
week.
front page
Monday,
of the
Wednesday,
Manila
Friday.
Times. Yeah.
And then, of course, Professor Bush Valdez has a weekly or I think several times a week also on Katipunan ng Demokratikong Pilipino, KDP. Please follow the Katipunan channel.
Yeah, we are twice a week.
Twice a week.
On Sundays at 7 p.m. to 9, and on Saturdays at 5 o'clock to 6, with Rita Gadi and Ado Paglinawan.
Yes.
Those are the topics that mostly you don't hear from the mainstream. So do follow us. We are in IDSI Center. And on behalf of IDSI Center President, Mr. George C., who said that we will definitely have a festive lunch soon. And please stay safe. Professor Ana, I leave the closing remark to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Austin. I would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to all our panel of experts. And thank you so much for sharing your views, your knowledge, and even your experience on these very important issues that does not only affect, this issue is not like geopolitical competition between the United States and the rest, and of course foreign policy of the Philippines is not only that this will not only affect the Philippines but the world at large. And I would like also to thank our media partners and media friends, because there are a lot of media partners who attended this forum. Thank you so much for attending, and our audience also for equally giving us your comments and your thoughts on this issue. Yes, I agree also with Professor Boots and also Senator Tata that we should have more of this conversation and media forum, because this is one way of trying to educate our kababayans and also to deepen our understanding of very important and relevant issues that affects the country and the whole world. And I hope that I would like to say that have a good day to everyone and a very productive week to everyone as well. And yes, for our side, please follow GTNR and FB. We have 3 regular programs. I'm not right now able to participate, but Kamentong is there. Ado Paglinawan is always there to give us their views and also to report back what are the important issues both inside the country and outside. So GTNR and FB page and also in YouTube. And also follow our Asian Century journal. It's also in Facebook page. It has also a Facebook page. Usually I write and published in our own journal and sometimes in other publications as well. So thank you very much to everyone. Have a good day, and we will see you soon in our next media forum. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Stay
Have
safe.
a good day.
Thank you, Professor Bush Valdez and Senator Kit Tatad. Very enlightening.
Salamat.
We also have
Salamat
government
po.
officials and educator friends here. So regards internationally. Have a
Very
good day.
good.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye
Very
bye,
good.
everyone. Thank you so much.
Mentong.
Kit,
Yes, Kamentong is here.
good
Si
to see you.
Kamentong, I'm going to unmute everybody. If you want to chat a little bit longer, we can chat. Kamentong, you were recognized by the floor. Kamentong, are you there?
He was there. Okay,
Ask-
salamat.
Okay, have a good
Gusto
day.
niyo
Kamentong,
sige.
are you there? Wala na yata. Kumain na siguro. We'll have lunch soon together.
Thank you so much.
Professor Bush, good to see you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Anna. See you soon. Take care.
Record.